And for Washington, D.C. today, all of this follows threats to assert more federal control over our nation's capital. In his announcement, he said, quote, "I'm going to make our capital safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. The homeless have to move out immediately." He also promised to give homeless people places.
The homeless have to move out immediately. The words came directly from President Trump via his Truth Social account, followed by images of tents and litter near key federal buildings. His demand was blunt: clear, visible homeless encampments from central Washington, D.C., especially around symbolic sites like the White House and the State Department, and relocate those individuals far from the nation's core. The order has sparked a wave of discussion across political, legal, and humanitarian circles. Is this a decisive federal intervention to restore order, or a move that risks sidelining local authority and community-based solutions? To understand the full scope, we need to break down what happened, why it matters, and what could come next. From a post to a policy, the Truth Social announcement, President Trump's message was unambiguous. The homeless have to move out immediately. We will give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol. The criminals, you don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong. There will be no Mr. Nice Guy. We want our Capitol back. The accompanying visuals showed streets lined with tents and debris. The tone was urgent, signaling not just a public statement, but an operational order. This post wasn't an isolated comment, it was backed by federal action within days. The choice of words like "far from the Capitol" indicates that relocation, not merely shelter provision, is central to the plan. The distinction matters because it suggests that the primary objective is removing visibility of homelessness from federal zones rather than addressing root causes. An old idea resurfaces: tent communities outside cities. This isn't the first time Trump has addressed homelessness with relocation ideas. In 2022, he proposed establishing high-quality tent cities in low-cost areas outside major urban centers. The concept was pitched as a solution to keep city streets clear while still providing shelter options, albeit far from the economic and social hubs where services, jobs, and communities are often based. The current plan echoes that earlier vision. However, critics and advocates note that quality tents still represent a minimal standard of living, and that relocation far from a city can lead to disconnection from critical services. Supporters argue it's a pragmatic way to restore public spaces and maintain safety while offering basic shelter. Federal agents on the streets, and a show of authority following the announcement, up to 450 federal law enforcement officers were deployed across key zones in Washington, D.C. This included Park Police, U.S. Marshals, FBI personnel, and DEA agents. Their presence was focused on areas under federal jurisdiction, such as the National Mall, Lafayette Square, and streets near government buildings. While the use of federal officers is legally permissible on federal land, extending their influence to city-controlled streets pushes against legal boundaries. So far, National Guard involvement has not been confirmed, but speculation remains high due to Trump's willingness to use military or paramilitary force in similar circumstances elsewhere. Mayor Muriel Bowser pushes back. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser responded swiftly, rejecting both the characterization of the city and the necessity of the federal intervention. She pointed to declining violent crime rates except for homicide, and emphasized that the city's data contradicts descriptions like Trump's earlier claim that D.C. was more violent than Baghdad. Bowser made clear that local law enforcement remains under city control. Her administration stressed that the Metropolitan Police Department is not being federalized, nor does the president have the authority to unilaterally take over city policing under current law. Understanding the numbers, homelessness in D.C. According to the Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness, Washington, D.C. has approximately 3,782 people experiencing homelessness on any given night. Of those, about 800 are unsheltered, living outdoors or in makeshift camps. The city operates a network of shelters, transitional housing, and outreach programs. Many individuals choose not to enter the shelter system for reasons ranging from safety concerns to restrictive rules. This group, highly visible in public spaces, is often the focus of public and political attention. Advocates stress that homelessness is tied to complex causes, high housing costs, mental health challenges, addiction, and systemic inequality. Simply removing encampments does not address these underlying issues. Federal authority versus local governance, Washington, D.C., occupies a unique position in the U.S. political structure. As a federal district, it hosts numerous federal properties and agencies, but it also has its own local government, led by the mayor and city council. The president has direct authority over federal lands and agencies, which allows for measures like deploying park police or securing the National Mall. However, extending authority into city-managed areas requires legal justification, often involving emergency declarations or congressional action. This tension is now at the center of the standoff. The federal government asserting its vision for the capital's public spaces versus the city's control over its streets and residents. A pattern of targeting. Major cities, the DC action is not an isolated event. Earlier this year, Trump directed National Guard units into Los Angeles to assist in handling migrant arrivals and urban safety concerns. That decision was controversial, with critics framing it as federal overreach into a Democratic-run city's jurisdiction. Observers note that the current approach in D.C. follows a similar pattern: high-profile interventions in cities where homelessness and public safety concerns are visible, coupled with strong public messaging to frame the federal role as decisive action. Unanswered questions and potential outcomes. Key questions remain about the D.C. plan. Where will relocated individuals be housed? Will these be temporary shelters, long-term housing options, or tent encampments outside the city? Will relocation be voluntary or enforced? Federal officials have emphasized places to stay but have not detailed whether compliance will be optional. What legal challenges could emerge? Civil rights groups may contest the removals if they are seen as violating due process or humanitarian protections. How will city services respond? The D.C. government could increase outreach or shelter capacity to maintain control over its homeless population without ceding authority. The answers will shape not only the outcome in D.C., but also set precedent for how federal and local governments interact on homelessness policy in the future. Public spaces and public responsibility. This development is more than a matter of clean streets. It's a test of how the United States balances public order, humanitarian care, and the boundaries of governmental power. For some, the federal move represents long overdue action to protect the symbolic heart of the nation. For others, it's a displacement effort that risks sidelining vulnerable people without addressing the structural issues that put them there in the first place. What do you think? Should federal authorities take the lead in clearing and relocating homeless populations in Washington, D.C., or should local leaders be the ones to decide? Share your thoughts and keep following for updates as the situation evolves.